Welcome to my podcast, Leading for Value. This is Ken Rethmeier, and it's my pleasure to have you here today. And for those of you who have seen some of the others, this will be a continuation of some of that thinking and applied in this case to the leader's critical role in managing teams and getting the most out of the team as best you can. And the primary purpose for our session today will be to provide you with two tools that fit nicely in this idea of leadership. And I will be sharing the screen right now so we can get in and start talking about what we're going to do. And so when you look at this slide, I think the key piece here is to recognize that leader's role is critical in so many different respects. There's a primary organizational role, and depending upon the nature of the organization, you may or may not have a very heavy hands-on approach, maybe not. In the case of guiding teams, it's trying to get those teams to align very closely with the strategic direction of the organization, its vision, values, goals, and objectives. And when those are done well, and those are monitored and matched well with the team's performance, then there's no doubt that you're going to have an exceptional outcome. And the basis of most of this is really around communication and a leader's capability to communicate effectively, directly, with honesty, and with building trust. And I say that all the time, but I can tell you without a doubt, whenever I was going into an organization, especially during my consulting time, the first thing I would sort of take a look at was what is the behavior of the top management team below them, and then how does that relate to whoever's the CEO, president, or whatever the nature of the business is, and what you call the leader. And remember, if you're the leader, you set the tone, you set the mood, and certainly the internal level of trust. So you have a platform that can be really a great opportunity if you use it to your own advantage and the advantage of the team. And so today, the two tools we're going to be working with are going along to help you in that regard. So let's talk a little bit about the challenges and opportunities. And it's a really interesting piece because in today's world, especially now, we're post-pandemic. During the pandemic, as you all know, there were a lot of changes to the way businesses were conducting themselves, how much time people were spending in the office versus out of the office. And I can guarantee you that caused obvious disruption. Whether it was voiced or not, it had to create some disruption in the continuity of the processes that were being used to make those critical decisions and the contributions to the mission of the organization or company. And so in this regard, we're now seeing many of those organizations returning back to the model of being in the office. And they're sort of nurturing that on a piecemeal, incremental fashion, if you will. They don't want to just throw you back in it. But it does establish a different set of behaviors because when you're in the office, you have a different set of viewpoints, if you will, and people will be seeing you much more frequently. So as a consequence, when you get back into the office, it's going to be the first time in some cases that those teams have actually worked together, arm in arm, in the same building, in the same office. And for those interactions, this is a time for leaders to do their very best to make that transition equal, very simple, and very effective. So what we're going to do is look at two tools. And the first one is going to be coming off of this idea of the evolution of the forming, storming, norming, and performing model created by V.W. Tuckman about how organizations and teams are developed. And there's 4 phases. The forming phase is you're getting started. You're sort of setting some initial ground rule and trying to learn a little bit more about who am I working with, what are their interaction styles, what are their leadership preferences, and work accordingly. And that sort of leads you into a storming phase. And the way it's described on this is very polite, but it's also very important. And it's important that teams go through that. And what happens is those disruptions can cause what we refer to as stutter steps, but it also gives you an opportunity to back up and say, okay, what are we trying to do? How are we doing it? And what can we do to make it easier and better? And then that leads you to a transition into what we'll refer to as the norming phase. And that's when the relationships between the team members are well established. People know who does what and when. And the interdependencies of those relationships in achieving the best outcomes is also very, very important, because that will help to optimize your collective behavior. And when you do that, you now set a platform where you can really push, and the leaders can pull very hard to bring the team to the highest level possible. And that's when you see some really great stuff coming out of it. So this model is a very interesting model. It's going to be part of a handout that I've created that I'll be attaching to the podcast when I'm done. And remember, these are all visual podcasts, so I encourage you. You can listen to them, but you'll get more out of them if you're watching. And so that's the first sort of context, if you will. So in order to get things going, one of the tools, an exercise, very interesting little exercise, 6 things about myself. And I was introduced to this quite by accident in one of my organizations. And the whole idea is that as you go through these 6 questions, you're sort of doing it first by yourself, and you're writing down some answers. What was the most significant factor that contributed to my career success? I might say there was a person that I reported to that when I went in his office to help guide him and give him my advice about a decision he had to make, whether he took my advice or not, when I walked out of that office, I felt like I had made a tangible impact on his thinking and his decision process, whether he took my advice or not. And that was really important. So when I got into those kinds of positions, I looked for people who were willing to come in, be honest and thorough. And I did the same thing, try to make them feel good. It really does trigger the kind of behavior that you want to see. And then the other questions sort of get to, how do people describe me? What are the events that have helped me grow in the past year? And what's the biggest difficulty? And that's one that's tough. That you're not going to share those with the whole group, but you're going to share it with somebody else. And that's in the second phase. And then it gets down to the crux of the matter, and that's the issue of trust. How you define it. How do you know when someone's being trustful? And how do you know when you're trusting and sending out positive signals? And then the last one is the tough one. What can I do to help others trust me more? And it's a very good, interesting tool. It's designed for small groups. You pair up at one point and you spend some time. And then as a group, you talk about what went well and what could we do better. And what did we learn out of this little exercise that we could leverage every single day to make our team the best that it can be? And then you do a debrief exercise. What went well, what didn't go so well in terms of the actual process. And at the end, good leaders encourage their people at the next level down to conduct the same exercise so that it sort of permeates the entire organization. And it becomes something that people really understand, and they think about that. And that's very important. So when you come in the morning every day, you're thinking about, how do I fit in? How do I help promote a team effort? Because we are a team, and that's how we're going to be successful. Now, here's a couple of pieces of information. You say, what do you say about this concept of improving team development? Is it important? And then I say, and who cares anyway? Laugh out loud. Let me begin with a quote from the great lady, Meg Wheatley, in one of her books that she wrote, Turning to One Another in 2002. I think had in that book a sentence that it just sticks with me every single day, every day that I'm in working. When I was doing my consulting, the same thing. And the quote is, it's not our differences that separate us. It's our judgments of each other that do. And if you think about that, that goes a long way. And I've seen that firsthand in organizations, both as a leader, as a follower, as a consultant, and teaching, and what people want to say and talk about. So that's a very important one. And the second tool is going to be the Ladder of Inference. And that was created by Chris Argyris and then expanded by Peter Senge and his team in the field book of the fifth discipline, the learning organization concept. And here's, I think, 4 comments that are absolutely true. In our case, when we think about things, our beliefs are the truth. That's how we've developed the way we have. The truth is obvious. To us, it is, individually. And then our beliefs are based upon real data. And so basically, as we go through this journey of leadership and working, we pick up pieces of information, not all of it, but a lot of it. And that helps us to build that picture and that belief system. And the data that we select are the real data. In other words, we discriminate about some stuff, set it aside, is not important. But on the other hand, it is very critical. And in the Ladder of Inference, this is what it looks like. Basically, going up and down the ladder determines whether you're trying to advocate what you do, that's going up, or on inquiry going down. And most leaders work off the top, because when they get you in the office, they might say, we've got to make a decision. It's got to be done now. And then it's really good for them if they would step back and say, let me tell you how I developed that decision. Here's some data that I used. This is how I see it, the conclusions I came to. And there were some assumptions that I made coming into this exercise about what's important and what's not important. And when I put all that together, I saw 2 options. I'm making this up, obviously. And option A works out in my mind to be the better of the 2 options. So that's what I'm proposing that we're going to pursue. And then the leader should turn around and say, what can I do to help you understand my process? What do you think of it? And if you go back to the previous podcasts, that's when you're into are we in the tell mode, sell mode, the consult mode, or whatever. And that's a better way of running it. So the Ladder of Inference is one of those tools that's very effective in helping leaders deepen their understanding of their own decision-making process, as well as helping those that work for them to be better decision makers themselves and their own interactions, to provide a baseline or a platform for outstanding decisions and great results. So those are the 2 tools, 6 things about me and the Ladder of Inference. And I think both of them work effectively well, and I would encourage you to think about that. So let me sort of summarize some other key points that I want to make here. And again, this is based upon my own experience, my own research, my own writings, the consulting work that I've done and teaching in multiple countries, mostly in healthcare, in the oil industry, as well as financial services. And it's interesting, I saw a lot of the same things happening with teams and leaders in all 3 of those industries. And oh, by the way, I did spend some time also doing some consulting with not-for-profits, which was another avenue of learning for me. Very interesting. So what are the characteristics of behavior of leaders that reinforce creating the best situation and platform? Say it again. Be honest and clear in all that you say, so that when you start talking, people can trust you and believe what you're saying. They don't have to say, I don't think he meant that or she meant that. And you don't want that. You want it very clear. And then also back to the ladder of inference, be more aware of your own thinking and reasoning. And as you may have remembered, I'm a firm believer in the Myers-Briggs type indicator. And we each have different processes that we use in making decisions, how we take in data, how we interpret the data, and how we can come to conclusions and make decisions. So that's very important. And then open your thinking and reasoning to others. Why is that important? Because if they work for you and they report to you, you want them to give you the best advice possible. And if they understand the kind of person you are, how you like to deal with data, then they're better equipped. And if they have to do something that they think is different, you give them an opportunity to sort of see the foundations you have, and it makes it easier for them to say, okay, I hear you. I need to ask a question. And then the other is to ask others about their thinking and reasoning. Now you can do that with the group. And that's just a matter of, at the time you're having meetings and decisions, let's talk about that decision. What do you think we did well? What do you think we could do differently the next time we have a decision like that? And then let's remember, we're going to monitor the outcome, and we're going to determine whether we made a good decision or not. And at the very bottom there, remember, the leader's best power, the most power you have, is the ability to absorb uncertainty. And when you do that, your team really looks at you in a different way. So let's go on to the end. I want to thank you again for your attention in episode 12. In episode 13, we're going to be doing some things around team diagnostic questionnaires and team leader assessments. And those are going to be provided to you, again, as a PDF. But it depends upon your willingness as a leader to be vulnerable and allow your team to do an assessment of you. And is your team willing to take a look at themselves? So that's going to be, again, a very critical part of this whole learning process. And I think they all work together in very synchronous ways, and they can build momentum. And as a leader, you'll find that it'll work. Trust me, it'll work. So look forward to seeing you next time. Take care. And if you have any questions, send me an email. I think I've got my email address on some of the materials, or send it to Podbean and I'll pick it up. Thank you very much again. Bye for now.